Manager, Grant Kleinhens.
Good evening.
Eileen Fisher, Counselor. Counselor David Lindsay.
Good evening.
And Vice President, Counselor Gary Rakes.
Good evening.
Go ahead and start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and take off your hats. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. These minutes were distributed to the council on February 14th, 2022. If there's no changes to those minutes, they'll be approved as submitted. Seeing none, they're approved. Next up is the public hearing. Grant, you want to give us an introduction to that?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the council and our residents here in Speedway, this evening we'll have a public hearing where you'll have the opportunity to address the council about the proposed sewer and water rate increase. I wanted to give a very brief summation of the items that we've provided over the past couple of months. We also will show the video that we showed at the first reading in January again, and then our engineering firm, Wessler, will give about a 5-minute presentation, which is a summation of their comments at that time. So before we go into the video, I did want to read, and I provided this to the council. January the 7th, we did post the first video in a 3-part series titled The Speedway Water Cycle from Creek to Creek. That was pushed out via Facebook, the town website, and other social media, and was hosted on our YouTube channel. Monday, January the 10th, the council heard first reading on the proposed sewer and water rate increase ordinance and set this evening, Monday, February 28th at 7 p.m. as the public hearing date. January the 11th, we had another video called Why Do We Need a Rate Increase? It went through the different capital improvements that are planned or part of this proposed rate increase. January the 28th, we had a second video in that 3-part series, the Speedway Water Cycle called Upgrades and Repairs. February the 3rd and February the 11th, the town published notice of the public hearing in the Indianapolis Star and Indiana Business Journal as required. On February the 7th, the town clerk treasurer did send by mail a required notice of rate increase to out-of-town users. On February the 10th, Speedway Town Talk published a story where the information was obtained from Jacob Blaisdell, our clerk treasurer, and myself. That was, I thought, a very good article explaining the different increases. I know that went to almost every home in the Speedway area. It's a free publication. February the 14th, we had our third video in a 3-part series titled The Speedway Water Cycle, the proposed rate increase. February the 16th, we had a question and answer session where Jacob and myself answered some questions that we've heard from residents or received in emails or calls and posted that on our YouTube channel. February the 25th, while at the casual conversations with the town manager, I had printed handouts available and answered a couple of questions regarding the proposed rate increases. If, after the public hearing this evening, if the council wishes to continue, Monday, March 14th, the second and final reading of that ordinance will be considered. Wednesday, June 1st, if approved, the rate increase will become effective. During July, bills for June consumption will be received in July and will reflect that June increase. And then August 10th, those bills will be due. So with that, we'll go ahead and show the video, if that's okay, Brian, if you could tee that up. The town of Speedway takes a lot of pride in the provision of water and wastewater services to our residents. Part of the problem, though, is that those facilities are starting to age.
The surface water plant was constructed in 1964.
The groundwater plant was constructed in 1972.
The original plant was in 1954. So the next expansion or the next project was in 1970. And we do still have equipment that was installed in 1970.
Just trying to make everything last as long as it can. You know, squeezing every last bit of life out of every piece of equipment, whether it's a pump or a truck or whatever it is, just to try to operate it as efficiently as we can.
We've got a lot of pretty antiquated equipment, so we really need to get this upgraded, and so we're experiencing more issues sometimes when equipment goes down. It can affect other processes to the point where it takes a while to get back to normal operation.
Constantly having to shut the plant down because we have concrete that's dropping into our basin and not allowing our sludge to drain because we're getting hung up on concrete chunks. Our high service pumps over there at the groundwater plant need updated, and it would help us if we did get them updated because we, you know, oftentimes they just won't simply turn on. They've been in service for so long, parts for them are becoming obsolete or people to work on them, you just can't find them to where it needs to be re-engineered and constructed.
We don't really have enough money to make the investments in our capital and all the infrastructure that we need to do long term.
As regulations evolve, so do the treatment plants have to evolve, and so they have to upgrade and install processes that can meet those limits.
At sewer, we were able to release a lot of funds from the refinancing that we did of all the sewer debt in 2020. So with those funds, plus the rate increase, we anticipate being able to fund everything with cash and not having to issue debt. So at water, we're looking at funding with certainly the cash on hand that we have, and we're also looking at using a lot of the ARP funds, the federal ARP funds. We're allowed to invest that in sewer and water infrastructure, so we're going to use that to offset the increase that would be needed.
We want to increase production here at the plant, increase what these filters can maintain, reconstruct our basins, get some more efficient mechanical components.
For a typical Speedway resident, so that's 4,000 gallons or less, that person's water bill is probably looking at about a $10 increase. And then at sewer, again, same Speedway resident, 4,000 gallon customer, they're going to see about a $5 increase per month. If the increase is approved, our new water rate would put us in the middle of the pack in central Indiana. If the sewer rate is approved, we would go to third lowest, still an enviable position.
It is a public health issue, so in order to protect public health, you have to meet these certain limits and treat the water to the point where it's not a hazard, a public health hazard.
So without investing in our infrastructure, we risk not being able to properly treat our drinking water or make sure that the wastewater released in the environment is also pure.
It's important to process the surface water to ensure the safety of the water consumption and ensure that it is aesthetically pleasing to our customers. We've got fertilizers, we've got, you know, animal feces, stuff that runs off into the creek, we've got fish, we've got everything that lives in the creek. There's more hazards in the water that need to be treated and zapped before we can consider it potable.
We have to plan. We really don't have a choice at this point.
Something that we want to take care of. Water's a vital function. Everybody needs it, and you know, it's kind of helpful that we have control over that resource in the town.
The main reason we do what we do is to protect the environment and to protect water quality, not only for us, but for generations to come.
There we go.
Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing for ordinance.
Vince, we have one other part, sorry. One other part. So we've invited this evening Dylan and Bridget, and I apologize for getting your name wrong last time. They do have about a 5-minute presentation to go over the capital improvements and how those plans were put together.
Okay.
Good evening.
It's all yours.
I'll be brief, and I'm going to cover both water and wastewater just for time. Bridget is here if there are questions related to the wastewater component, but But again, I'm Dylan Lambermont with Wessler Engineering, and I'm going to talk about the capital improvement plans that were prepared for both the drinking water system and the wastewater system. I believe we have a slideshow, which I'll speak from.
There you go.
Okay, so just a quick overview, starting with the water system, we've got a lot of pieces, okay, and those pieces are getting older. We've got 13 wells, 2 treatment plants, and a whole network of pipes underneath the ground to get the water to the customers. So that's just a map showing kind of where those components are and some numbers on capacity. Next slide. So how do we evaluate that system in a systematic manner to make sure we're prioritizing the funds that we're talking about with this rate increase in the right place? So what we did, the approach we took is asset management, where we looked at the probability and consequence of failure. So we want to figure out how likely it is for a component or an asset to fail, and then how big of a problem will that be for the system, for the customers if it does fail. It's a very methodical way of approaching this and allows us to put projects side by side and prioritize and rank them in rank order. Next slide, please. Just some pictures. Pictures tell a lot of the story on what we've got in terms of aging infrastructure. So these are some of the well facilities, the pumps and motors and the well houses. Next slide, please. On into the plants, very similar vintage of equipment and structures. Next slide, please. And the groundwater plant. And that's just down the road here on 10th Street. Next slide. Several elevated storage tanks. These are expensive assets and they are expensive to maintain. And very important to maintain because they're steel, and if they rust, then we have a problem. Next slide, please. Okay, just as a visual, consequence of failure on the pipes in the neighborhoods, it's not that huge of a problem if it fails. Probability of failure is driven primarily by age. So south of the railroad tracks, south of Crawfordsville Road is where the older parts of the system are, and that's reflected in the red in terms of the areas that are most likely to fail. Next slide, please. So this is a 20-year planning period. We rolled up as a summary a 5-year list of projects. It's a considerable amount of work. So there's $13 million worth of work there, ranging from well improvements to plant improvements, then moving on out into the system with the distribution system and the tanks. There are chemicals that are stored at these treatment plants that safety is paramount to their continued operation, so making sure that those facilities are safe and alarming is in place. Implementing a water main replacement program, a valve replacement program, and a hydrant replacement program is very important as part of this as well. Those are pieces that Speedway staff can do with their own forces. They just need the funding and some equipment to be able to do that. Next slide, please. On the wastewater system, again, starting in a similar overview fashion, there's 71 miles of pipe in this system, 1,400 manholes. That's a lot of infrastructure to maintain. Next slide, please. Same kind of format, just showing pictures to give a feel for what the age of some of these components are with the lift stations and some equipment for the treatment facility. Next slide, please. Okay, aging infrastructure. So a lot of this is not rebuilding, it's trying to look at these things and figure out what can be rehabilitated versus what can be and needs to be replaced. Next slide. And again, some of the large structures, large concrete structures, they're outside, they're exposed to the elements that need to be tended to. Okay, next slide. And next slide. Similar routine with collection systems. The trunk lines on these pieces are the ones that have the likelihood of a large consequence of failure, so where all the wastewater is collected. But probability of failure is a little bit differently distributed than what it is on the water side. It does extend into the northern parts of the system. And next slide. I think maybe reflective of the numbers that were talked about in the video, the cost for a 5-year plan on the wastewater side are less than on the water side. The projects are primarily focused on some improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, There's a lift station, Chapel Hill lift station, that really needs some attention in terms of its capacity. So a lot of capital is needed with respect to that. So the total 5-year estimate is around $6 million. And I believe that's the end. Okay. Okay.
Yep, thank you
Very much.
Okay. So I think with that, Vince, we're ready to open the public hearing. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:15. And first off, I want to thank everybody that attended tonight. It shows that you guys care about the town's infrastructure. It's important. It's a very important topic, and this council takes it very serious when it comes to any rate increases, but also maintaining the quality of our water and wastewater. Just need to say that we'll tend to try to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes so that everybody would have ample time to answer any questions, address the council tonight, and then if you'd like to leave any questions or concerns and additional, please write any questions down, or basically you can send anything to Grant or any member of the council, and we'd be happy to get back with you in relationship to those answers. So at this time, again, when you come to the podium, just state your name and your address, and you're welcome to speak to the council concerning this rate increase.
I just have a quick question. I live in Chapel Hill. Your video there said that sewage rate increases for town residents would be about $5. Well, according to your rate schedule, a person in Chapel Hill will be paying $30.77 more. So that's skewed quite a bit. Could you address that problem?
So it wouldn't go up that much. So for out-of-town resident, I think you're referring to the out-of-town limit surcharge that's part of the rate process. So right now, an out-of-town resident that's just a sewer customer for like 4,000 gallons, that's kind of the typical monthly cost, is $32.12. That would be going up to $39.66 total.
I was looking on here where it said for a 3/4 inch meter connection, it was going to be $52.89.
So we had to send the entire structure. So a lot of the things like tap fee, sewer connection, those kinds of things were part of the notice that had to go out because that's part of the ordinance. So I acknowledge that it was kind of confusing because we were just complying with what the state requires us to put out. But in terms of just rates, you're not a new customer, not installing a new meter or anything like that. It would just be going to $39.66.
Okay.
But it was confusing.
All right. I thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder, just give name and address.
Good evening, Curtis Miller, 1700 North Whitcomb Avenue. Start off, I want to thank the town for posting Wessler's report online. That kind of transparency is much appreciated. Just to note, a couple of the appendixes were missing out of that. Stuff I would have liked to have looked at, specifically the groundwater capacity analysis. On to the reason why I'm here, though. Wessler conducted a survey for potential well sites, scoring them. They came up with 11 sites, 3 of which are on public property, one of which is my own at this point in time. And I can appreciate that this report is a general, here's how we can meet Speedway's water needs moving forward, but as a resident who's looking at potentially having a well in my backyard, it does not describe what I'm going to have to deal with. And it's not just me. If you look at, it is figure A13 in the reports. It's not just me. We're looking at 12 homes. And having just submitted a variance for a design standard to a garage, I had to submit letters to about 20 people around me, because what happens on my property affects people around me. Well, now we're doing something that's affecting a chunk of houses, 12, and even more beyond that. And having looked at the pictures of these wellheads and the structures around them, they look pretty bad. So I definitely am concerned about what that will do to property values, not just of my property, but my neighbors and surrounding us. So moving forward, if the council is pursuing wells on private property, like I said, there are 3 proposed in this document currently, more information as to what that's going to look like for us. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the basic answer to that question what is that we just identified the need for new wells. Anytime there's a well identified on private property, we'd have to contact those people, discuss that, and it doesn't even mean those wells would be viable, right? It's one of those things we'd have to discuss that, look at it. You have every right to say, nope, not interested, and we would have to move on. The reality of most of our improvements, we're trying to rely on surface water out of Eagle Creek as much as possible. The wells are kind of a winter type arrangement, so I don't know if that answers your question, Curtis, but we don't have any specific territory or properties identified as tomorrow we're going to start building a well. It's one of those things that we need to identify new wells and find those properties that make the most sense. I don't know, Jacob, if you have anything else.
I'll just add that, in our conversations with Wessler, we haven't talked about anything on private property. It's all been on public or publicly owned. And then because we are looking at potentially adding a well to supplement what we have right now, the only thing in the capital plan would be one on public property, potentially. So there's nothing in this capital plan that would do that, to put anything on private property.
Okay. Anyone else would like to speak to the council? Please step forward.
Good evening. My name's John Reller, and I'm at 5503 West 16th Street, and it looks like more people are aligned with me than not. I thought we might have a room full, but I'm here to speak in favor of this proposal. Having reliable drinking water is very important to me, and I think it's also very important to a healthy community, and these improvements are well overdue. No one likes paying more for what you used to get for less, but that's just the way it is. And this can't be put off any longer. So I commend Grant, Jacob, and their staffs for the detailed study that's gone into this proposal, and also the transparency which has been provided. We like that kind of communication, and so that's very nice. And so I encourage you to vote in favor of this ordinance. Taking care of what we have is very important, and I think it's well overdue. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Anybody else that would like to speak to the council? Come on.
Good afternoon. My name's Adam, 5741 West 18th Street. I, like John, want to support what is kind of being proposed from a standpoint of our drinking water and our sewer. I 100% agree that it's a situation that is probably overdue at this point, and the longer that this is delayed, I'm also a banker as my normal job, and costs do rise, and we're seeing that very currently now. So the faster that we can get this kind of addressed, I would support. I've lived in Speedway my entire life. I'll be quite frank that I didn't really understand that this was a need, and hearing the cost was kind of alarming at first, but kind of hearing everything that you guys have put out to kind of explain why this is needed makes a lot of sense to me. One question that I do have, and I don't know if this can really be answered at this point, but will this change the taste that the water has? Because I have heard from other people within the town that they don't like the taste of our water, so I was just curious to know if anything would change there with these improvements.
That I don't know.
It's just something that was brought up to me, and so I thought I'd pose it out there, just to kind of put it out there as a comment. But I and my wife, Christina, support this kind of measure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dylan, is that something you can respond to?
Absolutely. Could I take it from the seat, or would you like me to come up?
You should come up to the microphone, please.
I appreciate the comment. And so from a taste perspective, the water meets all requirements in terms of its quality. You know, it's safe to drink. So the improvements that we talk about in the capital plan are focused on maintaining the infrastructure, making sure they don't fail, making sure it continues to meet regulation. We did not have enhanced treatment for additional taste or those types of things as part of this currently in the plan. So.
Okay.
Dylan, just to clarify, water tastes different at different times of the year. We're drawing from the creek, surface water at one part of the year. We're drawing from groundwater at different times as well, and that has an impact, right?
Yeah, so traditionally during the winter, the surface water plant is turned off. So between, Thanksgiving and March, that facility is online, so all the water that goes to the customers is from the groundwater, from the aquifers. So there is a variation just in terms of where the source is from year to year, but I think temperature also has a pretty big impact too, that you've probably noticed. So, so that's correct.
Yeah, our system is somewhat unique in that we are treating both surface water, so water off of the creek from Eagle Creek, and then as well as at times groundwater. So that's just to kind of, for anybody listening, that's a little bit of the background, and that is a little bit unique. And so the taste can change from time to time. Typically, when I notice it, it's as Dylan just mentioned, kind of warmer months, there's a little bit more algae growth. That will change the taste. At times, when that happens and we get notice, they'll mix carbon into the water to kind of help with the taste and smell. That basically turns it into like a huge Brita filter. They kind of mix it in and then filter it out. And so there's some things that they do from mitigation perspective. We are looking at using surface water a little bit more, but that's more in colder months. Surface water is generally not as hard. I think some people have kind of had questions about that. When we're using groundwater that's been through, there's a lot more minerals in that. It's harder water. So potentially kind of not necessarily the goal, but maybe kind of just a side benefit, if you will, would be kind of softer water generally, but the taste is not, as Dylan said, that wasn't necessarily the focus of it. It's just kind of a byproduct of it.
Thank you, Dylan.
Okay. Anybody else would like to speak?
Steve Jones, 2024 Cunningham. I think people need to keep in mind that we're very fortunate here in Speedway to have water, sewer, schools, police, fire, all of it. Sometimes people in these other communities don't get that much attention, and those things cost money. Unfortunately, that's what happens. You have to pay for those things. So hopefully people will keep that in mind, because I'm proud of it. Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak to the council? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting, public hearing at 7:29. And we'll move on to our regular scheduled agenda. Next on the agenda is the approval of the on-call engineering agreement with Wessler. Jacob?
This is, are we going to do this together or just one at a time?
It's up to the council. They're listed separately on the agenda.
Let's just go ahead and go through it then.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are on-call agreements. We've typically renewed these. They sunset every year. These are just agreements that as small minor projects come up, whether it's at the utilities or depending on the firm with a street project, we can or the superintendent can kind of utilize those services. That way it's not a longer process to get things done, get projects moving. Again, these are smaller items, so any major project would come as a separate agreement before council for approval. But these are things we've had in place. We used to kind of just let them go. Each one was kind of unique. We have a more uniform process now. We like to have them sunset at a certain time. Doing these every year is kind of a lot. These actually are to go for 2 years this time around. So we'll have a little bit of a break, but there should still be a sunset clause in them, which these have. So happy to take any questions. This first one, it looks like, is with Wessler.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the on-call engineering agreement with Wessler Engineering as presented.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Open it up for discussion. Anybody have any questions?
I do have one question in terms of the address listed in here. It is old.
Oh, man. Dylan will have to get that address corrected.
You still have us over at the shopping center.
We'll make sure that's amended.
That's an easy fix.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Jacob, these have a maximum, correct? Once, if we go over that, it has to come before us for approval, correct?
Yeah, for more major project, yeah.
The maximum on this is 25,000?
Correct, yeah.
25,000 per assignment, yes.
Okay. And that's been the standard for us, correct?
Yeah, at the high end. We've also, I mean, we are on the side of bringing things to council.
Right.
So we've had some that have been separate agreements, but below that. But yeah, that is a cap on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of an on-call agreement with Wessler Engineering signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next is approval of on-call engineering agreement with Kieser Consulting Group. Jacob, is that yours too?
Yep, sure.
Okay.
Kieser Consulting, we have utilized them primarily for work on road projects, mill and repave type stuff. They've been very helpful with community crossing matching grant. Same deal, sunsets in 2 years. There's a cap on it. Major projects will still come to council.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the on-call emergency agreement as presented.
Second.
Okay, I get a motion and a second. I'll open it up for questions.
Same issue, address is out of date.
Okay.
Town hall.
That corrected.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that we didn't catch that. I apologize.
Any other questions for the agreement?
This is the same, the 25,000 limit on this as well,
Yes.
just so the public's aware of that.
Okay, no other questions. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the Kieser Consulting Group signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the approval of on-call engineering agreement for Stormwater, basically the MS4 program. This is with Christopher Burke Engineering. We have a motion for approval of the...
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve the on-call engineering agreement for Stormwater, the MS4 program with Christopher B. Burke Engineering.
We got a motion and a second. I'll open up for questions.
Can Grant, can you explain this to us?
Yes,
please?
yes. So this is a slightly different one. This is for a couple of projects specific. There are 3 parts to this new MS4 consulting services. We have a permit we have to apply for. There's some changes coming through IDEM. So they will help us through that process. There are 3 parts. Notice of intent, $2,000. Stormwater quality management plan, up to $10,000. And then on-call as-needed MS4 consulting services, $3,000, for a total of not to exceed $15,000. So each of those elements, we believe, will be completed by November of 2022. There's actually a couple of dates. May of 22 will be the notice of intent, and then November of 22 will be the other two items as they are needed. But we really need this help with Christopher B. Burke to make sure that our MS4, we are in compliance, and our NPDES permit is not in jeopardy. We don't believe that's the case, but we want to make sure they will guide us through that process. So I'll answer any specific questions you might have about that.
So on this, it says ongoing on page 2, but then on the front page, it says completed by 2022. So is it, and Jacob was saying these are 2-year deals, so.
So the on-call the ongoing part is simply that any on-call services that we might need with them. That's up to an amount of $3,000. So this agreement is not a 2-year agreement. I believe it's just 1-year agreement, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, this is slightly different, and it's
More
kind of to help
project
Brad a
specific.
little bit on a specific project, yeah, with the requirements, the compliance requirements.
So that is a difference, yeah.
So this is one that's new. We've not had this before, correct?
We have not.
We've used Burke in the past, I believe, on
For projects.
wastewater, stormwater near the Coke Field, dry run ditch. Thank you.
Dry run ditch project.
And for the public's benefit, Brad, you were referred to as our wastewater superintendent.
New wastewater superintendent, yeah.
2 months.
And we have the address right. So that's
Yes, I think I corrected that one because I noticed that specifically, but the other two slipped by, so.
Okay, is there any other questions concerning the agreement? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of an on-call engineering agreement with Christopher B. Burke, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next is the approval of an independent contractor agreement with Kevin Schrader for electrical inspections. Grant?
Yeah, so this is an agreement, actually, we've never had an agreement in place, although Kevin's been working for the town off and on for 20 years. He was under the older understanding, without an agreement, he would charge us approximately $500 per month, $6,000 per year. This agreement memorializes and increases that amount to approximately $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year. I know one of the questions that came from the council was, how much dollars are we collecting on these permits? We did provide that to the council. It looks like roughly $70,000 per year, although that can fluctuate. If we don't have a lot of projects, we may not collect that amount, but I think the average was somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 per year. We also have one on here for HVAC inspections with Rick Stiensberger, and that is a lesser amount because we don't collect as much on those HVAC, heating, ventilation, and cooling inspections.
I think you said for...
We need to have a motion, I think.
Well, let me make that motion, by golly. I'd like to make a motion, Mr. President. We approve the contractor agreement with Kevin Schrader for electrical inspections.
Okay, second. Got a motion and a second? Okay,
And now-
proceed with your question.
Yeah, now the question, I believe you stated that for the 20 years or so that Kevin's been doing inspections for the town, he's never increased the rate.
Never.
So he's been at that, what, 500 a month for 20 years?
Yes.
So I think he's a little past due.
Not to mention, there's been a lot more permits pulled in electrical
in
the last 10 years with our effort in
with some of the growth at Allison's. And in our discussions, I talked to John, our Merritt, our building commissioner. Kevin does exemplary work, very reliable, does them very quickly, and I think that the change in compensation is very justified.
Is there any other questions concerning Kevin Schrader's agreement? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of approval of an independent contractor agreement with Kevin Schrader for electrical inspection signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item is the approval of the independent contractor agreement with Rick Stiensberger for HVAC inspection grant.
Yeah, so similar arrangement. The fee on this is, I'm sorry.
800?
Yes, 800, I'm sorry. I have misplaced my agreement. Rick has not, thank you. Rick has not been doing this as long for the town. We also don't quite have as many of these per month, but the revenue will easily cover that cost, which then covers some additional staff time as they have to review things and meet with contractors as well. So also, I think a very good arrangement for the community. Remember, these are staff members that we don't have to have or don't have to have additional certifications or requirements that require additional time and effort. We can rely on them to assist in this effort. So we recommend approval of this agreement with Rick.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the independent contractor agreement with Rick Stiensberger for HVAC inspections.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. I'll open up for additional questions.
Both of these grants are for 1 year, correct?
Yes.
So then next year, we'll do the same thing?
Yes. I think that will allow us then to look at,
Reevaluate?
yeah, reevaluate rather than just it going 20 years and nothing changing.
Yeah, good
Now,
idea.
this is for residential and commercial, right?
Yes,
He's
does both.
inspections of both.
Yep. We don't have a lot of residential growth, but sometimes those new HVAC units still
Replace
needs
them,
to be inspected, so.
Any further questions? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of approval of independent contractor agreement with Rick Stiensberger, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 5-0. Next is the approval of professional services agreement and locally funded engineering agreement with American Structurepoint for a comprehensive plan grant.
Thank you. So we, as you know, we did receive a $60,000 planning grant through the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. Once we received that and received notice of that in December, we issued a notice for request for proposals for various engineering firms. We received 4. A group of staff, there were 6 of us, interviewed those 4 consultants with presentations. They were scored. The American Structurepoint team was the one we chose together to select. They have provided us with the basic $60,000 OCRA-funded grant for the comprehensive plan, but also I had asked them, because we put additional funds in there to cover some additional engineering type study elements, including a comprehensive plan and potentially looking at some options for a couple of our major thoroughfares that we don't own, but that we work with Indianapolis to improve, like Lyndhurst, 16th Street, and others. So they've also provided us an agreement in the amount of $30,000 for a capital improvement plan that includes a lot of those items that will come out of the planning process and will allow us to then systematically, just like the water and wastewater plants, look at improvements that need to be done over the next, say, 5 to 10 years through that capital planning process. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have. I appreciate the staff that put their time and effort into reviewing those proposals, and I think I look forward to working with StructurePoint and trying to replicate what they've done in the past with our Main Street, but also look at the entire community for the next 10 years.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we approve the independent agreement with American Structurepoint as presented. Sorry, it's a professional services agreement and local funded engineering agreement.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. I'm going to open it up for questions.
I did have one thing. Grant asked me to review these two agreements, which I've done, and I did have some revisions to them. I don't think they're anything that StructurePoint is going to object to standard in terms of limits of liability and those types of things. So if you do choose to approve them, I would request that you do it subject to those revisions.
Okay.
So I'll amend my motion to include edits that our attorney recommends.
And one other comment we can't necessarily sign the agreement. If it's approved tonight, it has to go through OKRA, and they have to release the funds before we can sign our agreement. So your approval tonight will also be contingent upon OKRA's release of that planning grant. We don't want to get signing an agreement and move forward without that because we can lose that $60,000.
So here it says 60,000, but you said something about 30,000.
There's a second agreement. So there's a local funded engineering agreement, which is here, and also the $60,000 OKRA. So there's actually two agreements, one for 60, one for 30, one that's paid for with OKRA funding, the other will be paid for with local funding. So we actually listed both those agreements on the agenda. I should have done maybe a better job of explaining that. I apologize.
Do we know when this will be completed by? Is there a date that they have to provide?
OKRA will require that it go through a public hearing process and be adopted by March of 2023. Now, that's assuming we get started in the next 30 to 45 days. If OKRA doesn't approve those agreements for, say, 60 days, that may delay that a little bit.
Grant, can you let the public know basically what's going to be included in this comprehensive plan for the town of Speedway?
So it will involve the formation of a steering committee. That steering committee will guide that planning process. Potentially underneath that steering committee, there could be several subcommittees assigned to look at various aspects: economic development, Main Street, Parks and Rec, trails and connectivity. But it will involve a series of public meetings, surveys, presentations to gauge what the community wants and what we want to look towards, and then that will be put into a written plan that will guide the community in our decision-making process for the next decade. We kind of had a similar thing, but it was looked at really just on Main Street. This is a comprehensive plan that looks at every aspect of the community, a little wider reaching, a little more encompassing of every aspect, and will help us guide and direct development. We don't have a lot of new development, but redevelopment, development of housing, changes in our land use and code, all of those elements. So it's a lot of public input. We would hope that we get, feedback and input from residents, elected officials, appointed officials, boards and commission members to help guide this process that will guide us through the next decade of our development.
If I could also, it's very important in the land use aspect, and in fact, it's statutorily required that you have a comprehensive plan based upon, the division of the excluded cities last year by the legislature. You adopted Indianapolis's comprehensive plan as it related to Speedway, but it's important that you have your own, and it's statutorily required. And so this will be a roadmap for you sitting as the Plan Commission as well as the Board of Zoning Appeals when they make decisions.
Great. Anything else? Hearing none, got a motion and a second on the table. I'm going to call for a vote if there's no other comments or questions. All those in favor of approval of the professional services agreement and locally funded engineering agreement with American Structurepoint for the comprehensive plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Jacob, we're down to you.
President, let me back up just a minute. We also have an address issue in here.
Okay, that's
Town Hall.
I'll correct that.
Sorry.
Should say 5300, but it says 14.
1450.
Yeah,
And that's for
Lyndhurst.
locally.
Yep.
Okay, next is approval of claims. Jacob?
This claims presented to you for your review and approval represent those made from February 12th through February 25th. I'm happy to take any questions or would appreciate your approval.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve the claims as presented to us by our clerk treasurer.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions for Jacob? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the claims as submitted by town clerk treasurer signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Jacob?
Utility adjustments represent those made over the same period, February 12th through February 25th. There are a few late fee adjustments due to misapplied payments from our payment processor, and would appreciate your approval on these as well.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the adjustments as presented by the clerk treasurer.
Second.
Get a motion and a second. If there's any questions concerning utility adjustments? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next on the agenda is our town manager's report.
I just have one item, a reminder that the State of the Town address is Thursday, March the 10th at 6:30 p.m. here in the Allison Meeting Room. We also will start tours of the new Speedway Municipal Center here at 5:30. So we hope to have people come out. There will be refreshments provided by the Lions Club, I think brownies and drinks as well, but look forward to sharing what has been accomplished over the past year here in Speedway. That's all I have for this evening.
Okay. Do we know who's additional speaking in that?
Cheryl, I know Doug Bowles from the track, Kyle Trebley, Superintendent of the Schools.
Sanjay Patel from MHG,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
And then the CEO of Allison.
David. Transmissions.
I pronounce his name wrong every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's move on to report from counselors. Eileen?
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay. Gary Pedigo?
Just real quickly, I'll beat the horse one more time. If you're able physically to donate blood, please do. There is a need here in central Indiana. That's all I have.
Councilor David Lindsay.
Just one, I think the announcement's been made, but I want to make sure the public is aware of it. In the town talk, they put a little small snippet in that the 500 marching band at the high school raised their funds. They had to reach a goal of 50,000 to order new uniforms that they had that were 14 years old. And the Speedway Lions Club, the Motor Speedway, and Dr. Isigbe made very nice contributions to that, as well as there was a lot of fundraising that the band did. And I'd just like to publicly thank those that gave, and also the three that I just mentioned as well. The uniforms will be in for the band to march in the parade and in the 500 coming up this year. So it's
great.
Really want to thank the whole town and the community for their efforts in that. That's all I have.
We look forward to looking at the new uniforms.
They are sharp.
That's great. Vice President Gary Ricks.
Just one thank you to the community for turning out on Saturday. The Lions Club had their annual pancake breakfast. They raised a little money, and I think there were nearly over 300 people there specifically, and it was a good turnout. So thank you to those that came out.
Okay. Next is a report from the council president. And I'd just like to say that I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and have their opportunity to speak to the council concerning their thoughts on the investment that we're about to make on water and wastewater. It's important for this town to maintain the quality level in both, and in order to grow and keep that quality of service that all the citizens of the town of Speedway expect. Also, we had an announcement of our new police chief, and Charles Upchurch is now the police chief. If you haven't heard it, he was assistant chief under a previous chief, and he's already really stepping forward and meeting the expectations and moving forward with the police department. I look forward to seeing exactly what he has in mind in the coming months, and in order to continue that type of service that this town expects in terms of police and fire. So thank you very much. That's all I have for tonight. If there's no other questions or discussion, I'm going to adjourn it at 7:55.